He stood on the stage beneath glittering lights. The applause was deafening. Flashes of cameras bounced off his navy suit. His smile, dazzling. His name, known across continents. Matthew King, billionaire tech genius. Time magazine's Man of the Year. CEO of the fastest-growing software company in the world. A man who had everything. Or so it seemed. Thousands of miles away, in a forgotten town at the edge of nowhere, an old woman named Mary sat alone in a tiny wooden house, staring at a photo of her son. It had been 12 years since she'd heard his voice. Matthew wasn't born a billionaire. He wasn't born with a silver spoon or a famous last name. He was born in a broken-down cottage in the small town of Millfield, to a woman with calloused hands and a heart bigger than the world. Her name was Mary. Mary King was a widow before Matthew turned 5. Her husband John died in a car crash on a rainy night, leaving her with nothing but debt, and a son to raise alone. She never complained. She woke at dawn every day to clean people's homes. She scrubbed floors, washed clothes, even cleaned school bathrooms. And in the evenings, she sold homemade bread at the train station just to buy her son books. "Everything I do," she would say, "is for Matthew. He's going to be somebody one day." Matthew was no ordinary child. He was bright not just in school, but in spirit. He read every book he could find. He fixed old radios. He asked questions no adult could answer. His teachers said, "This boy has a future far beyond this town." Mary never missed a parent meeting, even when she had to borrow bus fare. At school events, she clapped the loudest, wearing the same old dress she'd stitched over and over. People whispered behind her back, "Look at her, always pretending like she belongs. Why doesn't she just accept her place?" But Mary would smile. Let them whisper. Her dream wasn't for clothes or status. Her dream was for Matthew. One night, after selling every last piece of bread, Mary returned home and found Matthew still awake studying under a flickering candle. He looked up. "Mama, I won first place in the math competition." She dropped her basket, rushed to him, and held his face in her hands. "You will sit with kings one day," she whispered. That night, she gave up her dinner so he could eat, just like she had done for years. And Matthew, he studied harder. By the time he was 16, he had earned a full scholarship to Lincoln City University, one of the best in the country. The day he left for college, Mary held on to him like it was the last time. She pressed a small brown envelope into his hand. "Here," she said. "It's all I have. $200. Use it wisely." Matthew shook his head. "Mama, I don't need your money." But she insisted. "It's your beginning. Let it carry you forward." He hugged her tightly, trying not to cry. "I swear, Mama, when I make it big, I'll buy you a real house. You'll never have to work again." Mary smiled. "I believe you." And just like that, he boarded the bus. She stood there long after the bus had disappeared, watching, praying, hoping that her son would remember who he was, and who had loved him first. College was everything Matthew had dreamed of, and more than he'd ever imagined. He stepped onto the campus of Lincoln City University, wearing shoes with worn soles and carrying a suitcase with a broken handle. He didn't have much, but he had fire in his eyes. For the first time in his life, he was surrounded by people who spoke with confidence, walked with privilege, and never had to choose between food and textbooks. Matthew worked harder than anyone. He spent hours in the library, skipped parties, and built software tools, while others played video games. He barely slept, teaching himself coding languages at night, while keeping his grades at the top of every class. Professors noticed. Startups on campus noticed. Even the dean pulled him aside one day. "Son," he said, "if you keep this up, you're going to change the world." But Matthew didn't do it for recognition. He did it for Mary. Every day, he thought of his mother, of her swollen hands from scrubbing toilets, of how she used to cut her meals in half so he could eat more. He carried her voice with him like a compass. "You will sit with kings one day," she had said. He believed it now. But something else crept in too. A hunger, not just to succeed but to never be poor again. That hunger grew faster than he could control. During his third year at university, Matthew built an app that helped students manage class schedules and tutoring. What started as a side project exploded into a full-blown business overnight. Within 3 months, he had 5,000 users. Then 10,000. Then venture capitalists started calling. Big names. Big money. One investor offered him $1 million to license the technology. He turned it down. Another offered $2 million to buy it completely. He said no again. Matthew had bigger dreams. He dropped out in his final year, much to the shock of his professors. "You're a semester from graduating." One of them cried. Matthew smiled and said, "I didn't come here to get a degree. I came here to build a future." And he meant it. He moved to the city and rented a single-room apartment above a noisy restaurant. Every day, he coded until his fingers went numb. He hired 2 interns with the little money he had. He drank instant coffee and ate noodles to save cash. And then, the breakthrough came. A major tech blog featured his app. Downloads skyrocketed. By the end of the year, he had 500,000 users. Then investors came back, but this time, he said yes. He raised $10 million in funding. He launched his company, Bright Core Tech. By the age of 26, Matthew King was worth $50 million. He bought a penthouse. He drove a silver sports car. He was invited to private clubs and elite conferences. He was no longer the boy from Millfield. He was a man the world admired. But he hadn't called Mary. Not once. At first, he told himself he was busy. Too many meetings. Too many deadlines. He would call her next week. Then next month. Then another year passed. Eventually, he convinced himself she didn't want to hear from him. She'd be embarrassed by how different he had become. "She's proud of me," he told himself. "She understands." But Mary waited by the phone every Sunday evening. She cooked Matthew's favorite meal on his birthday each year, just in case he came home. And every Christmas, she placed a wrapped gift under a tiny plastic tree labeled to Matthew. He never came. Her neighbors stopped asking about him. Some pitied her. Some mocked her behind closed doors. She raised a millionaire who won't even call. She wasted her life for a son who forgot her. Mary said nothing. She still smiled. Still believed. Still prayed. He had promised, after all. One night, alone in her room, Mary opened the envelope Matthew had returned untouched years ago. The one she gave him at the bus station. Inside, the $200 were still there. Untouched. Crisp. Flat as the day she packed it. She held it in her hands, tears running down her cheeks. Not because he hadn't spent it, but because he never needed to. He had gone on without her. Left her behind in the very life she'd tried to save him from. Still, she whispered his name. "Matthew, my boy, wherever you are, may God keep you." Back in the city, Matthew stood in a glass office overlooking the skyline. He was preparing for another merger. Another public appearance. Another feature article. People called him a visionary. An icon. A self-made genius. But in the stillness of some nights, when the world was quiet and his phone wasn't ringing, he sometimes remembered her. Her voice. Her scent. The feel of her hug that day at the bus station. But he pushed it away. That life is over, he told himself. And he believed it. Until the day the letter came. It was handwritten. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside were 3 short lines. "Dear Matthew, I don't need your money. I just wanted to know if you're still my son." He stared at it for a long time, then set it on fire over his kitchen sink, and walked away. 3 years had passed since the letter arrived. 3 years of awards, wealth, interviews, and headlines. Matthew King was now a billionaire. Not just successful. Iconic. He graced magazine covers. He was interviewed on global talk shows. He bought companies the way most people bought groceries. People praised his discipline, his vision, his focus. But behind the polished exterior, something had begun to shift. His smile grew thinner. His laughs became hollow. His nights, restless. He would lie awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by a voice he had tried to bury. That voice, Mary's. He could hear her humming softly as she cooked. He could almost smell the stew she made on cold nights. He remembered the way she used to wrap his books in old newspaper, so the pages wouldn't tear. But he didn't call. He couldn't. Pride had grown inside him like a weed. Slow, silent, choking everything else. He thought time would soften the distance. But instead, it made it worse. Then came the night of the gala. It was an event to raise money for education. Matthew was the keynote speaker, a billionaire telling young people how to chase their dreams. He stood on stage, flashing cameras blinding him from all sides. He began with a smile. "I came from nothing," he said. "I built this from scratch. No shortcuts, no favors." The crowd applauded. He continued, "My story proves that no matter where you come from." Then he paused. For a split second, his throat tightened. The word mother hovered in his mind like a ghost. He pushed forward, smiling again. "You just need vision. And drive. That's it." But the applause sounded different this time. His voice wavered. He finished early. Later that night, at the after-party, surrounded by luxury and important people, Matthew stood by a window, glass in hand, watching the rain fall. A young woman approached him. "You're incredible," she said. "I read about how you were raised by a single mom." He nodded vaguely. She smiled. "My mom raised me too. I send her flowers every Sunday. Can't imagine where I'd be without her." And just like that, something cracked. A memory sharper than any photo rushed through his mind. Mary's hands, wrapping his books with care. Mary's eyes, watching the bus disappear. Mary's voice, trembling as she whispered, "I believe in you." He excused himself abruptly and left. He drove all night. No destination, just movement. He ended up in a neighborhood he hadn't seen in years. His old neighborhood. Millfield. Nothing had changed. The cracked sidewalks. The flickering street lamps. The corner store with the faded awning. He drove past the school he once walked to in the rain. Past the bus stop where Mary had sold bread in the cold. Past the small library where she'd begged for second-hand books. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. Finally, he stopped in front of the house. His house. Mary's house. It was smaller than he remembered. The paint was peeling. The roof sagged on one side. But the front yard was swept clean, like someone still cared. He got out of the car. Stood at the gate. Frozen. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. His hand hovered over the screen. He didn't call. He couldn't. Instead, he walked away. Got back into his car and drove to the hotel. The next morning, he woke up to a text from an unknown number. "Matthew, this is Helen from Millfield. I don't know if you remember me, but I thought you should know your mother is in the hospital. She collapsed last night." The words hit him like ice water. He stared at the screen, unblinking. Then read it again. And again. His heart pounded. His throat dried. He tried to move but couldn't. The weight of every missed call, every forgotten birthday, every silent Christmas, came crashing down on him. He called the number. "Where is she?" he asked. The voice on the other end was gentle. "She's at Millfield General. Room 104. He didn't wait. He left the hotel without packing, got into his car, and drove like a man possessed. When he arrived at the hospital, the nurse at the desk didn't recognize him. He didn't care. He walked straight to room 104. Inside, Mary lay in bed smaller than he remembered. Her hair now completely white. An oxygen tube in her nose. Machines beeped softly around her. A single chair sat beside the bed. He approached slowly. His legs trembled. His eyes burned. He sat down. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, he whispered, "Mama." Her eyes fluttered open. She turned toward him, and a slow, tired smile spread across her lips. "Matthew," she said. Just his name. Nothing more. But in that word, there was no anger, no bitterness, only love. He broke. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he said. I forgot what mattered. I forgot you. She raised her hand weakly and touched his cheek. You didn't forget, she whispered. You just got lost. He held her hand and wept. That night, Matthew didn't return to his hotel. He stayed by her side. He brought her soup the nurses said she liked. Read her old poems she used to love. Showed her pictures of the company she'd helped him build. I named one of the servers after you, he said. Mummy Mary. It keeps everything running. She chuckled softly. You always were a clever boy. He smiled through his tears. I should have come sooner. You came, she said. That's all that matters. And for the first time in years, Matthew King, billionaire, genius, success story, felt like a son again. Mary stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. 3 quiet, simple weeks. And for those 3 weeks, Matthew never left her side. He cancelled meetings, rescheduled interviews, left his assistant bewildered. Postpone the board call, he said. I'm not leaving town. He didn't explain why. For once in his life, Matthew King stopped explaining. He became just a son, not a founder, not a face on a magazine, not a name on a rich list, just a son. He brushed her hair. He helped her walk down the hall. He listened as she told stories he already knew, but had long forgotten, like the time he won a math competition in school, or the time he cried when they couldn't afford a birthday cake. She remembered it all, and now so did he. But outside the hospital walls, the world kept moving. The stock price of his company dipped. Investors grew restless. Rumors began to spread. He's distracted, some whispered. He's slipping. His co-founder, Liam, flew in from San Francisco. He stormed into Matthew's temporary office, which was now a corner of the hospital cafeteria. You're ruining everything we built, Liam said. Just hire a private nurse and come back. Matthew looked up calmly. She's not a product, he said. She's my mother. Liam scoffed. This company was your dream. No, Matthew replied. It was my escape. Liam shook his head. Fine. But don't expect sympathy when it crashes. He walked away. And for the first time, Matthew didn't care. Let it crash. Some things were bigger than business. Mary's health slowly improved. The doctors were hopeful. But she was fragile. Weaker than before. Matthew sat with the doctor one morning. She needs long-term care, the doctor said. She can't go home alone. Matthew nodded. I'll take her. The doctor raised an eyebrow. You, Mr. King? Matthew smiled. Yes, me. He bought a modest house in the same neighborhood. Quiet, clean, filled with light. He didn't return to the penthouse. Didn't go back to his old office. He moved in with her. Set up a bedroom with soft pillows and sunlight. Installed ramps and handrails. Put up photos from her youth. And every morning, he made her tea. It wasn't perfect. There were bad days. Days she forgot where she was. Days she dropped things. Days she cried without reason. But he stayed. He learned to slow down. To listen. He rediscovered the rhythm of real life. One that didn't depend on deadlines or downloads. He was finally present. And then came the offer. A phone call from a global tech firm. They wanted to buy his company. All of it. At a price no one could refuse. Think about your future, the voice said. Think about what you could build next. He hung up. He walked into the kitchen where Mary was stirring a pot of soup. Mama, he said, I got an offer. She looked up. An offer? They want to buy my company. She stirred slowly. Do you want to sell it? He paused. For a long time. Then he said, I used to think I'd be nothing without it. But now, I'm not sure I need it. She smiled. Then you already have your answer. He sold the company. The world exploded. Headlines screamed. Matthew King exits. Billionaire walks away. Genius quits. He ignored them all. He bought a community center in Millfield. Named it after his mother, the Mary House. It offered free classes for single mothers. Free meals on weekends. Books for children who couldn't afford them. He started showing up at the local school. Speaking not about startups, but about family, and time, and regret. He became a local legend. Not for his wealth, but for his presence. Years passed. Mary grew slower, quieter. One evening, She sat on the porch as the sun went down. Matthew sat beside her. She looked at him with soft eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said. He smiled. "I should have told you sooner." She reached for his hand. "You did. In your own time." He kissed her forehead. And in that moment, the boy who once ran from love to chase legacy felt peace. That night, she passed away in her sleep. No pain, no struggle, just quiet. Matthew sat by her bed as dawn rose, holding her hand one last time. He didn't cry. He just sat, still, grateful, whole. And when he stood, he wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was something better. A son who came back. A man who chose love over legacy. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. 3 days after Mary passed, Matthew sat in silence in the living room they once shared. The house felt colder, quieter, even though the lights were still on, even though the birds still sang outside. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just settles, soft and heavy, like dust on an unused piano. The funeral was simple. No paparazzi, no headlines, just a few neighbors, some old friends, and one son. Matthew stood in a dark suit, hands folded, eyes clear. No speech, no performance, just a long look at the casket, and a whispered, "Thank you." It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. The day after the funeral, an old man knocked on the door. He wore a brown coat, carried a folder under his arm. "Are you Mr. Matthew King?" he asked. "Yes." "I'm Mr. Wallace, your mother's lawyer." Matthew blinked. "My mother had a lawyer?" Mr. Wallace chuckled. "She didn't have much, but she had things she wanted said." Matthew let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Mary used to serve soup and cornbread. Mr. Wallace opened the folder. "Your mother left a letter. And a will." Matthew's fingers trembled as he took the letter. It was her handwriting. Familiar. Looped. Gentle. He opened it. "My dear Matthew," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. But don't be sad. I had more than I ever dreamed of. A home, peace, and my son back. You gave me that. I know life was hard. I know I made mistakes. I was ashamed for many years. Ashamed that I couldn't give you more. But I always loved you. Every day. Even when I had nothing else. I had that." Matthew paused, swallowed hard, then continued. "You became a man this world will never forget. But more importantly, you became a man I'll always remember. You could have stayed away. You had every reason to. But you didn't. You came back. And that means more than any fortune. In my will, I've left a few things. They're small, but they mattered to me. Take care of them. And take care of yourself. And one last thing. Don't forget how to love. It's what brought you home. Love, Mama." The room was silent. Only the ticking clock on the wall dared make a sound. Matthew folded the letter slowly. He didn't cry. He smiled. A small, broken smile. But it was real. Mr. Wallace cleared his throat. "There's more," he said. He pulled out the will. "In addition to the letter, your mother wanted you to have 3 things. Her wedding ring, her recipe book, and a box buried beneath the tree in the backyard." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "A box?" Mr. Wallace nodded. "She said you'd understand when you found it." That afternoon, Matthew walked to the backyard, spade in hand. He knelt beneath the old oak tree, the one that shaded her chair every morning. He dug quietly, the soft soil giving way. After a few minutes, the spade hit wood. He brushed away the dirt. It was a small wooden box, carved with initials MK. He opened it. Inside were photographs. Old, faded, but powerful. Pictures of her holding him as a baby. Of birthday parties. Of school plays. Of scraped knees and ice cream smiles. And at the bottom, a single newspaper clipping. A tiny article from years ago. "Boy from Millfield wins National Science Award." Matthew laughed softly. "She kept this," he whispered. "All these years, she had saved proof of his brilliance. Not for the world, but for herself." That night, he placed the box on the shelf above the fireplace, right beside her recipe book, and the ring now strung around a chain on his neck. He sat in the armchair, alone but not empty. For the first time, He saw the full picture. All his life, he had chased validation. From investors, from fans, from strangers. But the only person who had believed in him, unconditionally, had been sitting right in front of him all along. And he nearly missed it. The next morning, Matthew did something no one expected. He returned to the city. Not to reclaim his title. Not to step back into boardrooms. But to sell the penthouse. He donated the proceeds to a charity for aging women. Call it Mary's Home, he told them. A safe place for mothers forgotten by time. He also visited a local school. Sat with kids who looked just like he once did. Hungry for hope. He gave a talk. Not about technology. Not about disruption. But about time. About forgiveness. About the cost of ambition when it's not balanced by compassion. One boy asked, "Mr. King, if you could go back in time, what would you do differently?" Matthew paused, then answered softly, "I would have come home sooner." The room went still, and in that silence, something shifted. Not in the world, but in him. That night, he walked back to the modest house in Millfield. He cooked his mother's soup recipe, played her favorite record, and as the wind rustled through the trees outside, he whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Not just for the memories, but for giving him something no billion-dollar deal ever could. Clarity. He was no longer the man who abandoned his mother. He was the man who found her again, and in doing so, found himself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. If this is your first time coming across my channel, you are highly welcome. Please do not forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. To my returning subscribers, you are simply amazing. What would I have done without you? I appreciate you so much for always stopping by to watch my videos. See you in my next one.